15-year-old brother Michael would be involved.
Are you sponsored by them? No. What a question. Am I sponsored by them? I don't know. Have you ever heard me fucking shill for this particular company? I love when... Okay, I'm joking. All right. Because some people do unironically go, oh, Hassan, you must be saying this because you're secretly sponsored by them. And it's like, yeah, it must be the biggest secret of all time, which is famously not how sponsorships work. I am sponsored only by one group, and that is you, the chatters. The Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you, the viewers. For you, the viewers. Your $6 a month subscription or a free one in the form of a Twitch Prime allow me to maintain my editorial independence. That's right, the Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you. You can also gift... Oh my, I can't even finish it. You can also give subscriptions to others as well. Kubaka, they give you the 5 gifted. Let's continue.
Involved in a violent car accident near Oxford that left him in a coma for the remaining 7 years of his life. An event so devastating, the Maxwells' lives were suddenly and completely upended. As Elizabeth later wrote in her memoir, the consequences of such a tragedy were incalculable for us all. Describing the ways in which every family member coped with the event, Elizabeth admitted here to neglecting their youngest daughter Ghislaine during some of the most formative years of her life, recalling that, quote, Ghislaine, who should have been the center of our love and attention, was hardly given a glance and became anorexic as a toddler. One day, age 3, she planted herself in front of me and said simply, "Mummy, I exist." From that day, we all made a great effort with her, fussing over her so much she became spoiled. The only one of my children I can truly say that about. Yet, it's true that all the Maxwell children were well acquainted with the finer things in life. They grew up in the mammoth Headington Hill Hall, a secluded Italiente mansion straight out of Saltburn, which I checked, and it's only about an hour-and-a-half drive from the real Saltburn house, a fun fact for any Barry heads out there. Built all the way back in 1824, the 51-room palace first belonged to the Morell family for over 100 years, before being snatched up by media tycoon Robert Maxwell in 1959, who restored the property.
Mummy pilled. Mummy! Mother!
Property from its dilapidated state to a thing of beauty. In addition to replacing its original Victorian-era stained glass window with a depiction of himself as Samson from the Bible, Tatler magazine also wrote that Robert eventually planted guards along the property's main entrance, peppered the fence with barbed wire, and installed security cameras to nearby trees, which earned it the new unofficial name Purgatory Press, a play on his publishing company Pergamon Press.
What, as you think back, was the happiest time you've ever had so far in that house?
My children and my family being together. Every Christmas so far we have managed to be together, and seeing them happy and busy.
Historian Ben McIntyre described the Maxwell's children's upbringing as a mixture of cruelty and luxury, which isn't speculation if you read anything from Ghislaine's siblings. Her brother Ian stated physical abuse was a regular disciplinary tool used against both the boys and the girls. It goes without saying that Robert...
He only does this when he responds in kind. Hey, chatter, you keep sending this link of Bad Empanada demanding the address of a content creator. Are you out of your fucking mind? I mean, serious question. He only does this when he has to respond in kind, completely justified. Are you out of your fucking mind, dude? Do you need to be beaten with a belt, Ghislaine Maxwell style? Is that what's going on? Shut the fuck up. Like, what use is there for me to react to Bad Empanada demanding the address of another fucking content creator, no matter how fucking indecent or awful or evil they might be? What use? What fucking use? Can you only nut when there's like some kind of fucking drama taking place? Is that what it is? God damn. Thank you, State of Qatar, for the 10 gifted subs. The Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by the state of Qatar. Nardine Kaswani. While we're on the topic of Epstein, don't forget that Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine Maxwell, wasn't just a media mogul. According to his widow, Elizabeth's memoirs, he was a member of Beitar, a Zionist youth paramilitary group, as a boy in Czechoslovakia. Yeah. That's why I said he also played a formative role in trafficking weapons from the USSR through Czechoslovakia into the early Zionist brigades. When Israel had a ban on weapons transfers before Israel existed. There was a ban on weapons transfers into British Mandate Palestine. Anyway.
Robert's affection was hard to come by, with his strict expectations even extending to the dinner table, where he would berate his children.
Beitar's that old? Yes, Beitar is one of the OG Zionist, terrorist Zionist groups. Beitar was founded by Jabotinsky, which is a man who is even more fucking racist and reactionary than even Theodore Herzl was.
Verbally to the point of tears if they failed to engage properly with the topic of conversation he proposed. He was incredibly controlling in nearly every aspect of their lives, being extremely strict with the boys Ghislaine was allowed to date, for instance, as he reportedly had his own plans for his youngest daughter to one day marry JFK Jr. He considered Ghislaine his favorite child and made no secret of it, going so far as to name his super yacht the Lady Ghislaine. More on that little 180-foot monstrosity in a bit, but first, I want to take a moment here to explore Robert's own personal history.
We lived in one room with 7 children, hungry most of the time, did not have any clothes to wear in winter.
It's true that Robert Maxwell was a fixture in British society, but it wasn't always that way. Born in poverty to Jewish parents in 1923, Robert, or at that time Jan Ludwig Hawk, grew up in a 2-room wooden shack before being forced to flee his home country of Czechoslovakia as a teenager during Nazi occupation in 1939. He changed his name a total of 4 times, in part to hide his Jewish ancestry, before finally deciding on Robert Maxwell, joining the Allied forces and participating in the Battle of Normandy, even being awarded a military cross in 1945. Though it wasn't until after the war that he learned his parents, grandfather, and 4 siblings had all lost their lives in the Holocaust while he was away fighting. A traumatic revelation that would haunt him for the rest of his life, making an effort later on to rebuild the family he had lost to the Nazis, even setting out to have the exact same number of kids as his parents, 9. Teaching himself how to speak with a proper English accent through Churchill speeches, Maxwell's wartime resilience had successfully gained him the trust of his British superiors. And after being tasked with gathering intel on a suspected communist uprising in Paris, 1944, Maxwell was then reportedly relocated to Berlin and assigned to carry out espionage work for the British intelligence agency MI6 after the war, as written in John Preston's book, Fall. As a 24-year-old intelligence asset stationed in Berlin, Maxwell, I guess, got bored. He met a guy over there who ran a German publishing company. This guy was sitting on a huge cache of scientific journals that had yet to be published in the West. The problem was this guy was a German national, and at the time, German nationals were prohibited from making large overseas shipments for reasons that, well, I don't think I need to state. Maxwell then took it upon himself to secure the distribution rights and translate those journals to English before selling them to the West for a handsome profit, in an operation reportedly, allegedly, maybe facilitated and bankrolled by British intelligence. The only time, as one former MI6 member told Preston, that the agency had ever bought a business
lines here for defending Israel. But of course, when you're in the process of defending Israel, you got to also sometimes defend the Trump-Jeffrey Epstein connection. Here's what she had to say. Okay, in Donald Trump's defense, fucking 14-year-old girls was really only made a social taboo in the 1990s. My grandmother was born in 1927 and had her first child when she was 12. Okay. Teenage pregnancy only became frowned upon with the rise of Jerry Springer, and I can be honest about the fact that I was old enough to choose, seduce, and decided to fuck grown-ass men when I was 15. I really don't get why women are fronting like they weren't fucking 40-year-olds at 15. Like, come on now. I'm honestly not surprised or mad at Trump for getting some 15-year-old pussy because those were the times. Good night, USA, for fucking ever. Now, if he was fucking a 10-year-old, we have a problem. But if the girls were 13 plus, who cares? Move on. Azealia Banks logged onto her Twitter account and wrote those words in defense of Donald Trump, hypothetically doing statutory rape to a minor. That's where we're at. Incredible.
I guess my question is, are you open to a pardon or commutation? I mean, Mr. Speaker, the victims referred to Maxwell as Epstein's right-hand woman. Here's what one victim who testified under a pseudonym told the court at sentencing, quote, "The many acts that were perpetrated on me by Epstein, including rape, strangulation, and sexual assault, were never consensual and would not have occurred had it not been for the cunning and premeditated role Ghislaine Maxwell played." Is that someone deserving of a pardon or commutation in any circumstance, Mr. Speaker?
If you're asking my opinion, I think 20 years was a pittance. I think she should have a life sentence at least. I mean, think of all these unspeakable crimes. And as you noted earlier, probably 1,000 victims. I mean, it's hard to put into words how evil this was, and that she orchestrated it and was a big part of it. At least under the criminal sanction, I think is an unforgivable thing. So, again, not my decision, but I have great pause about that, as any reasonable person would.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or
So now it is time for us to get to the third installation of the Jaubrey saga, the finale, if you will. The perversion of Ghislaine Maxwell, the Jeffrey Epstein saga, part 3. Let's take a
Does
look.
it all look, is my hair good? Do I, it's all good. All right, we're rolling. It's so vast that, you know, when you go to the sea, the seashore, you only see that little piece of the seashore. You might see some plastic debris on there, but you don't see much past that. And it's very hard to connect to something that you don't feel a part of and something that you can't see. If the destructive activities were happening on land like they are happening on the ocean, I think that there would be a worldwide outcry.
The biggest crime by Jaubrey is that he will cover these horrific, monstrous criminals, and then he'll also cook up a fat-ass beat in the process. So then you just find yourself bobbing your head along while you're like, damn, Ghislaine Maxwell did a lot of sex crimes, huh? To minors specifically. And it's like, what am I doing right now? Why does this beat go hard? This is fucked up. I need to stop bobbing my dang head. You don't have to cook so hard, Jaubrey. You let your words do the talking. Okay.
So, I'm a big fan of the show Succession, and while I have yet to create an alt Twitter account where I baby girlify grown men, I did spend roughly $16 on a book of all the scripts from season 1, which I understand is maybe a little insane, but since I'm mentioning it here, it's now a tax write-off. As I skimmed over the first couple pages, I noticed the show's creator, Jesse Armstrong, naming 3 real-life media families who served as inspiration for the fictional Roy family. He mentioned the Murdochs, who control Fox News, Sky Sky News and the Wall Street Journal, and the Redstones, who own Nickelodeon, CBS, and Paramount. But the most notable person mentioned here to me was Robert Maxwell.
Flamboyant, charming, some say ruthless, Maxwell remains one of Britain's most famous adopted sons.
A British newspaper baron who owned a multitude of publishing companies throughout his lavish, controversial, and mysterious lifetime. Robert also just so happens to be the father of convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. Armstrong even specifically cited Ghislaine's close relationship with her late father as further inspiration behind some of his own characters. For all intents and purposes, the Maxwell family is like something we would see on TV. An intimidating patriarch at the reins of a multi-billion-dollar media conglomerate who forces his corrupt but privileged children to compete for his love and affection. If nothing else, the Maxwell mythos teaches us that fact can sometimes be more tantalizing than fiction. Because when you really take a closer look into what the Maxwells are really known for, not only do you find rampant financial fraud spanning numerous decades, you also get shady ties to international governments, capped off with a mysterious death that still has a myriad of unanswered questions attached to it. And that's all in addition to Ghislaine's own history of crimes, earning her a 20-year sentence in federal prison thanks to her notorious relation to one of the biggest known predators of the 21st century.
The judge making note prior to the sentencing that this is not an issue of Ghislaine Maxwell being a proxy for Jeffrey Epstein, she said, but this is someone who was part of a scheme.
I think you can see why I gave Ghislaine her own video now. Join me as we explore the endless mystique and depravity surrounding one of the most infamous names to ever grace headlines.
In his ivory tower, where high-powered executives queue for higher-powered decisions, publisher Robert Maxwell is pleased he's done it his way without a whopping.
Mirror Group Newspapers has just said that significant assets of their pension fund had been lent or transferred to private companies controlled by Robert Maxwell, apparently without due authority.
You've got to assume right from the beginning that you're dealing with people who have got the morals of barnyard roosters.
Because I don't foresee this video ever getting monetized, allow me to now issue a jarring transition into today's sponsor, Cook Unity. Cook Unity is a weekly subscription service that celebrates the creativity of your local culinary scene, partnering with award-winning chefs from across the US to bring you a wide range of meals with over 7 different dietary preference filters, including vegan, paleo, and gluten-free options, creating a high-quality at-home dining experience you can't get anywhere else. Choose from as little as 4 to as many as 16 meals delivered right to your door each week, arriving fresh, not frozen, via courier or shipment in compostable, recyclable, or reusable packaging, with expiration dates, chef's heating instructions, and nutritional information. But for best results, I'd recommend you heat them in the oven. Speaking from experience here, Cook Unity has made meal prep for me a lot easier. Tonight I had this grilled marinated flank steak by Chef Chris Rattel, straight from Austin, Texas. I also got to try their amazing kale pesto rigatoni and their cheese enchiladas, both of which I would highly recommend. So don't wait, go to cookunity.com/Jawbreak50 right now, or click the link in the description and use my code Jawbreak50 to get 50% off on your first order of Cook Unity meals to try out for yourself.
But
They're consistently great quality, so there's no reason not to give them a
Ethical reacts, dude.
shot, in my opinion. And that's not just because they're paying me. Huge thanks again to Cook Unity for sponsoring this one. Ghislaine Noel Marion Maxwell was born to Robert.
I work here, don't eat here. They donated to LAPD, please. I work there. Please don't eat here. Oh my God, last time I found an AirPod in the food. The kitchen manager tries to give out raw chicken. Please, I work here. Oh my God. Free AirPod doesn't sound too bad.
And Elizabeth Maxwell on Christmas Day 1961 at the same
That sounds like a steal, dude.
luxurious chateau where 8 brothers and sisters had also been born in Paris. Just 3 days after Ghislaine entered the world, her 16th for anyone. This placed Maxwell at the helm of a budding publishing company he named Pergamon Press, and went on to live a nice, honest life as an upstanding citizen giving back to the community.
Nope. Psych!
what I would say if I were lying. Robert Maxwell was pretty much the exact opposite of that. He was a pretty bad guy. He's a bad guy, okay? And something also that I thought was interesting is that Pergamon Press apparently once had a dude named Brian Cox working for it, which is weird because that's the actor who plays Logan Roy on Succession. No relation, obviously, but just thought it was funny. There aren't many people who get to say they're a billionaire, media magnate, con man, and international spy all at once, but Robert Maxwell sure did. Maxwell's alleged history of criminal behavior spans all the way back to at least 1955. When it came out, he had been stripping assets from his main company and selling them to make up for all the loans he had taken out, according to Preston. A fun little illegal strategy he would employ at different moments throughout the rest of his life, in fact. But being reported to the Insolvency Service wasn't about to get in the way of Maxwell's zeal for power. Running for prime minister in 1959, Maxwell was sure to prominently place his military rank of captain next to his name on the ballot, which is a little vain if you ask me. It didn't work, he lost the election, but this also wouldn't be the last time he would run for office, because shortly after Ghislaine's birth, and while the Maxwells were still dealing with the constant stress of their loved one being in a coma, Robert decided it was a great time to join Parliament. I can personally think of no easier way to immediately put your already anguished family under even more stress than pushing yourself further into the formidable world of politics. But he did, being elected Labour MP of Buckingham in 1964. Day before that election, Maxwell was also arrested for shaving while driving, which it doesn't sound that insane until you realize he was going in 90 miles per hour. Not something you want to do with a razor blade pressed to your face, honestly. Luckily, the mogul learned his lesson, though, being slammed with a hefty fine of 25 pounds. Great. Maxwell may have come from nothing, but he certainly wasn't representative of the average working class Englishman by the time he served in Parliament, becoming known as the man who gets things done, if by getting things done you mean introducing powdered milk to the cafeteria in the House of Commons. By the end of his second term, Maxwell had encountered some new problems over at Pergamon, being dumped from the board of his own company when he was exposed for, once again, artificially inflating his profits. But make no mistake, Maxwell was just as shrewd as he was corrupt. The man who ousted him from the company, Saul Steinberg, failed to realize that Maxwell still controlled an American subsidiary of Pergamon, giving him a ton of leverage he then used to bleed the parent company dry, forcing Steinberg to retreat in shame, according to Preston. Back in the captain's chair, Maxwell spent the following years of his life expanding his business ventures far and beyond what anyone could have imagined. During the 80s, he owned an Oxford football club and acquired a slew of companies including Nimbus Records, Macmillan Publishers, half of the British MTV. I mean, this dude was all over. One of his most lucrative companies, though, besides Pergamon, became Mirror Group newspapers, which included the Daily Mirror, the second most popular magazine in the country behind The Sun, owned by Australian media tycoon Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch had already stiffed Maxwell out of at least 3 major business deals at this point, all of which Maxwell took extremely personal. His son even told Preston that at one time, it was as if the only 2 people in the world breathing the same air were my father and Rupert Murdoch. It was also during this time that Maxwell began to finally embrace his Jewish roots he had long tried to downplay, though it is said he had previously been involved with some secret dealings during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, in which it's alleged he used his connections behind the Iron Curtain to persuade and facilitate his home country of Czechoslovakia to arm Israel with strategic air defenses that helped
before Israel. This is like this is circa Israel. This predates Israel. He was gun running when it was illegal to give any weapons to the Zionist brigades at all. So that's, I mean, he's using imprecise language, partially because I assume Jawbreed, especially a year ago, maybe, I don't know, probably was like, I mean, this is not something that many people even understand or know about, but yeah, that's what he was doing. There was a embargo, there was a weapons embargo on Zionist militias in his 20s. He was doing that. Brother, this is after World War II. You know what he was doing during World War II? He was an OSS agent. What are you talking about? He was already, yes. Yeah, like the Irgun and many of these other Zionist militias before the formation of Israel that contributed to like horrifying fucking violence during the Nakba that led to the inception of the Israeli state, they were getting weapons from Czechoslovakia by way of the USSR. And it was speculated that it was Robert Maxwell that was playing using his contacts within the USSR, which he continuously used throughout his entire media career later down the line, but used his contacts in the USSR to traffic weapons by way of Czechoslovakia to these Zionist brigades.
Push them to victory, at least according to what sources told journalist Mark Ahrens and former federal prosecutor and author John Loftus in their book The Secret War Against the Jews, How Western Espionage Betrayed the Jewish People. Maxwell didn't officially visit Israel until several decades later, at which point Preston asserts he was so moved he began a business relationship with Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad.
Yeah. Only then. Chatters. Only then. Yeah, definitely not before.
In addition to a hefty $250 million donation he made to the state of Israel, which made him the state's single biggest investor, he also worked out an agreement to, quote, pass on any useful information that came his way to Mossad. As written by Preston and originally alleged by arms dealer and ex-Israeli intelligence agent Ari Ben Menashe, who has not only repeatedly accused Maxwell of being a Mossad agent, but also blamed the billionaire for the imprisonment of Israeli nuclear technician Mordecai Vanunu, who, in September of 1986, threatened to blow the whistle on Israel's highly secretive campaign to obtain a nuclear arsenal. Unfortunately, Vanunu made the mistake of showing proof of these nuclear weapons to Robert Maxwell, hoping the story would be published in the Daily Mirror and blow the lid on the whole operation. Unfortunately, though, that didn't happen.
6 levels below ground, the Israelis had built a plutonium reprocessing plant, a nuclear bomb factory. To this day, Israel still refuses to acknowledge its existence.
As The Independent reported in 2004, Maxwell turned around and sent these photos to the Israeli embassy in London to, quote, supposedly confirm whether or not the story was true. It seems likely that Maxwell had motives other than journalistic integrity in this betrayal of Vanunu. As written by Preston, this resulted in Vanunu being, quote, snatched off a street in Rome by Mossad agents, injected with a paralyzing drug, smuggled on board a ship, and taken back to an Israeli prison, where he spent the next 12 years of his life in solitary confinement, subjected to what Vanunu called cruel and barbaric punishment. So thanks, Robert. Always looking out for the working man, huh? These allegations were brought to the attention of Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, the man who exposed the My Lai massacre in 1970. Went on to publish the Vanunu story in his 1991 book, The Samson Option. While Maxwell and the Mirror sued Hersh for libel, Hersh was eventually issued an apology from the paper and received substantial damages, which effectively ended the suit in 1994, according to the New York Times. The Mirror also did run a story about Vanunu shortly after he was imprisoned, but it was one where they cast complete doubt on his testimony and slandered his character up and down.
That's crazy, man. Oh my God, who would have thought? I mean, certainly today, obviously different time back then, where you have people who are directly working in unison with Mossad at institutions and media companies. Like, certainly today, you don't have many outlets that would do propaganda for the state of Israel, right? Like, that ended there. Story ends there. Don't look any further. Like, for example, how many in the top brass of the New York Times, how many people in the top brass of the New York Times have direct affiliations, affinities to the state of Israel, children that are currently serving in the Israeli occupying force, have directly served in the Israeli occupying force. Obviously, that's not like a reputable institution of journalism such as The Atlantic, for example, could not have a fucking editor-in-chief that was an Israeli concentration camp prison guard, right? Like, you know, that famous journalist that was in the Signal group with Pete Hegseth, the vice president, and numerous other heads of intelligence. That guy, I mean, that would be crazy, right? Yes, for the chatter who said, I'm acoustic. What is he talking about? Is he being sarcastic or sincere? Yes, I'm being sarcastic. I'm saying that there are still many ties to the nation state of Israel amongst reputable institutions, reputable mainstream media publications. Yes. Also, this guy is literally still under house arrest in Israel. Vanunu, Mordechai Vanunu.
Exactly defend himself because, well, he was in jail being tortured by the government. So Maxwell made a lot of enemies during his lifetime, though it was Rupert Murdoch who Maxwell became particularly obsessed with. Ironically, it was Maxwell's incessant urge to compete and exist in the same arena as Murdoch that, as Preston put it, led to his physical and mental disintegration, his downfall, and ultimately his death. In his attempts to earn Murdoch's respect, Maxwell ended up acquiring Macmillan for way more than what the company's own directors thought it was worth, borrowing from over 40 separate banks just so the transaction could be possible. Pulling a bit of an Elon there, I guess you could say. Adding to the long list of financial missteps Maxwell made throughout the course of his career. Before long, his debts had reportedly exceeded $1 billion. The banks he had borrowed from wanted their money back, and as a result, Maxwell began siphoning cash from the pension funds of his Pergamon employees. Some 763 million pounds were reported to be missing from his many companies by 1991, which included over 400 million pounds that he stole from pensions alone. Maxwell, if you can't tell by now, was kinda in some deep shit.
Robert Maxwell inhabited a realm of lies. Many people knew this, but kept their counsel. Cowardice, or respect for the law of libel, to which Maxwell would resort with apparently infinite funds to silence those who would scrutinize his secret.
In November of that year, just weeks before this revelation became public, Maxwell boarded the Lady Ghislaine for what was supposed to be a few days of rest and recreation on the high seas. Crew members recall his unusually cheerful demeanor, despite being faced with a mountain of legal issues back at home. The banks, the pensioners, and the authorities were all breathing down his neck. His son, Kevin, recalled a tense phone call with his father on the evening of November 4th.